Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Society of Albany. My name is Reverend Sam Trumbore and I serve as minister of this congregation. Before we begin, please check to make sure your microphone is muted. The same for your camera if your image is potentially distracting. Please also be mindful of your speech while you are on Zoom, as microphones have a way of getting accidentally unmuted. This will minimize any disruption of our service. You will also notice closed captioning at the bottom of your screen. If you'd like to turn that off, find the CC option on your Zoom toolbar and select it to access a hide it option. Thanks so much for your cooperation. This is now a time of transition, from ordinary time to sacred time. A time to check in with your body, to collect your attention, to be present in this moment. Let this moment be separated from yesterday and tomorrow. May this virtual space become a sanctuary for the next hour. Allow your screen to transform into a virtual community hall, to experience images, sounds, and music, songs, poetry, and prose that will lift your heart, broaden your mind, and move you to do justice in the world in the service of building beloved community. May this virtual service be holy time for each of us that joins us together in the celebration of life. And let us light our chalice together with the words you'll find on your order on your screen. Welcoming all free seekers of truth and meaning, we gather to excite the human spirit, to inspire its growth and development, to respond morally and ethically to a troubled world, and to sustain a vital and nurturing religious community. Let us sing together. We are climbing Jacob's ladder, an African-American spiritual, and Elena will again lead us in song. And we have a wisdom tale read by Leah Purcell.
Our story today is called Gordon Parks, How the Photographer Captured Black and White America by Carol Boston Weatherford. The youngest of 15 children, Gordon Parks was born in Kansas in 1912. As a boy, he could look across the wide prairie and imagine that anything was possible. But in his classroom, which was made up of all black students, the white teacher tells them, "You'll all end up being railroad porters, carrying other people's luggage, and waiters, carrying other people's food." But what did she know? After Gordon lost his mother at age 14, he moved in with his sister in Minneapolis. Soon on his own, Gordon worked odd jobs, busboy, piano player, and finally porter and waiter. And then, 25 years old and all but broke, a magazine spread about migrant farm workers inspires him to buy a used camera. That was the best $7.50 he ever spent. In 1 month, he taught himself enough for an exhibit at a camera store. Soon, he was shooting fashion and portraits. One model told him to take his camera to the big city. So he went to Chicago, and there he shot pictures of families in the South Side, and that won him a chance to become a government photographer. He left the Midwest and turned his camera on Washington, D.C. But Gordon asked his boss, "What should I shoot?" "You search for your subject," said his boss. In the nation's capital, Gordon passes the White House and the Supreme Court, and in the shadow of the Capitol, he sees black families living in alley dwellings. He can see that blacks have a harder time than whites. He passes statues and memorials to mighty heroes, but there are enough photos of white men carved in marble and stone. He sees white-only signs in shop windows and learns firsthand that even if there are no signs, it doesn't mean that a black man will be served. Well, boiling mad, Gordon went back to his boss, wanting to turn his camera on the racism that he saw. And his boss said, "There is your next subject." And he pointed to a woman working in the corner. She is Ella Watson, a cleaning lady in the building where Gordon worked. She supported 5 children on a salary of over just $1,000 a year. Gordon gets Mrs. Watson's permission to photograph her for weeks. And he follows her to her home, to her church, going to work at 4 o'clock in the morning. After a long day, she studies the Bible with her family. Gordon takes pictures of her grandchildren, too, dressing, eating, reading, playing, not yet knowing the racism they will surely face. Over his long career, Gordon's photos will run in Vogue and Life magazines, their first black photographer for 20 years. He will write novels, make movies, compose music and poetry. But Gordon's most famous shot will be of the one called American Gothic. In the newspaper, the photo exposed the nation to the unfairness of segregation. Standing before the flag of freedom, cleaning lady Ella Watson holds the tools of her trade and her hopes for her grandchildren. She knows all too well the opportunities the flag symbolizes are denied to her because of skin color. Yet she dares to dream and strive to be better. Through Gordon's lens, her struggle gained a voice. And that's the end of our story. And I wanted to tell this to you today because this is another story that I was not familiar with. And I hope that it inspires you to follow your dreams and stay committed to them.
And welcome to our Facebook viewers to Albany UU. And I have some opening words to begin this part of our service. Today is Palm Sunday in the Christian calendar. This is the day to remember Jesus's triumphant entrance into Jerusalem. His entrance was a parody of the grand processions on strong, handsome horses leading ornate chariots that announced the arrival of dignitaries as they entered Jerusalem. Jesus rode into the city gates on a little donkey, walking over palm fronds that were laid in his path. The crowds cheered just the same as if a king was entering the city gates. They cried out, says the Gospel of Mark, "Hosanna, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord." That entrance begins the last week of Jesus's life, often called Holy Week. Maundy Thursday remembers Jesus washing the disciples' feet and the Last Supper. Good Friday, his crucifixion. What got Jesus in trouble was his cleansing of the temple of money changers and those selling sacrificial animals. Jesus had a vision of the temple as a place of prayer and a place of peace for all people. Let us cultivate that vision of peace this morning. And my reading this morning comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21, verses 10 through 17. And when he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred up, saying, "Who is this?" And the crowd said, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee." And Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who sold and bought in the temple, and he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He said to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers." And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonderful things that he did, and the children crying out in the temple, "Hosanna to the Son of David," they were indignant. And they said to him, "Do you hear what these are saying?" And Jesus said to them, "Yes. Have you never read, out of the mouth of infants and nursing babies, you have prepared praise?" And leaving them, he went out of the city to Bethany and lodged there. Herein the reading. I have a spoken meditation for you this morning that is kind of a guided meditation to connect you with that moment in time that the reading describes. I invite you to turn inward to receive these words. Let us imagine in our minds what Jesus might have seen as he approached Jerusalem. King Herod had spent untold wealth reconstructing the temple, replicating its glory during the reign of King Solomon. It was a magnificent sight to behold for those who lived in rural areas and rarely saw walled cities. Such a display of opulence and wealth. Most would have responded with awe, which is the purpose of such monumental architecture. Imagine the great architecture you've witnessed or known about in your life, the Eiffel Tower, the Taj Mahal, the pyramids. or our own state capital here in New York, for that matter, all can move us with their beauty. But Jesus did not respond that way. He wept. He knew firsthand the hardship and suffering of the people driven into poverty to pay for this opulence. Those tears reflect how many rural Americans feel as they look to the opulent cities on our coasts with extravagant displays of wealth. Bring to mind those you know who suffer unjustly from oppression and victimization, neglected as they fall through the safety net that today has big holes in it. Let us hold those emotions in tension with each other. Let neither erase the other. Feel how hard it is to be in both places of worshipful awe and bitter tears. Don't try to decide which is right and which is wrong. Hold them together as best you can as we enter a time of silence. And enjoy this silent meditation video. Jesus did what prophets have been doing since Moses made a covenant with God to protect and bless the Jewish people. When he entered the temple's larger outer court of the Gentiles, he witnessed a marketplace of buying and selling. Not that he didn't know about it. Everyone knew. You couldn't use profane Roman coins with images of deified emperors in the temple to buy sacrifices. Everyone knew that your half shekel obligation to the temple couldn't be paid with Roman money. No one liked the lousy exchange rates that were offered. Even more objectionable was the scamming going on as part of the system of sacrificial offering. When someone came to offer a sacrifice, such as the one a mother was obligated to offer as a blessing for her newborn child, that individual had the option of bringing their own sacrifice. The law said that the sacrifice had to be without blemish It couldn't be some scrawny hen that wasn't worth anything. So temple inspectors looked carefully at what people brought. To stimulate sales of sacrificial offerings, they would look really, really carefully to make sure, to see if they could find something to disqualify the offering and force mothers to buy one at an inflated price. The whole system of sacrificial offering was well known at the time to be deeply corrupt and exploitative. So, like prophets before him, confronting royal corruption and temple exploitation, Jesus angrily disrupted it. In the Gospel of John, Jesus was described as using whips to drive the sacrificial animals out of the temple. In Matthew, we just heard about tables being overturned and merchants being driven out. While doing it, he proclaimed, quoting the prophet Jeremiah, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers." Jesus could have just given a speech in the courtyard where rabbis and teachers gathered their students and preached against the practices he saw. He could have quoted scripture and prophets and denounced what he saw. Instead, he acted and disrupted the buying and selling. His commitment to action was total and complete without doubt. He knew this was the right thing to do, and he knew he would likely pay an extremely high price for his action. Jesus holds these two truths together in the Garden of Gethsemane. Those poignant words on his lips, "May this cup pass from me, but thy will be done." He begs his sleepy disciples to stay awake with him, saying, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." They don't. Alone in these distressing hours before his arrest, his humanity shines through movingly as he holds his commitment to action with the results of his actions together. Christians often elevate the suffering of Jesus during Holy Week that ends with Easter, and I honor and am moved by the agony he experienced. And Jesus not alone, experiencing overwhelming sorrow to the point of death. I'm moved by reading about a Mexican mother named Miriam Rodriguez. I read about her story in the New York Times in December. In 2014, her 20-year-old daughter, Karen, was kidnapped. Miriam paid the ransom and more that was demanded. Her daughter was not returned. Eventually, Miriam intuited she had been killed. In San Fernando, the drug cartels in Mexico operate without much interference from the police. Miriam got little help in solving her daughter's kidnapping. She even sat down with a gang leader to negotiate. When all else failed, she took it upon herself to find those responsible and demand that they be brought to justice. She cut her hair, dyed it, and disguised herself as a pollster, a health worker, and an election official to get their names and addresses. She invented excuses to meet their families, unsuspecting grandmothers and cousins who gave her details, however small. She wrote everything down and stuffed it in her black computer bag, building her investigation and tracking them down one by one. It took 3 years for her to track down, get arrested, and convicted nearly every living member of the gang that abducted her daughter. The Zetas weren't appreciative of her one-person challenge to organized crime and success, putting 10 gang members in prison. On Mother's Day 2017, after she successfully identified one of her last targets, she became a target herself. She was shot to death in front of her home. Miriam is but one of many mothers and fathers who have risked their lives seeking justice. I think of the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo in Argentina. The mothers began demonstrating April 30th, 1977, to petition for their disappeared children. In September, on a pilgrimage to Our Lady of Luan, the mothers wore their children's diapers as headscarves with their names embroidered on them. In Chile, I think of the mothers who gathered holding pictures of their disappeared children, asking where they were, refusing to forget them. Susan Gunther Lewin, Mennonite, writes, think about it. Armed with nothing but their identities as mothers, givers of life, these women stood up to military dictators, to regimes of unspeakable torture and violence, those who gave life from their own bodies, thus stood as witnesses to the God of life, comforting those who would presume, confronting those who would presume to take life away, to do away with the lives and bodies they, as mothers, had co-created with God. None of those mothers wanted to be where they were. I'm sure they would have preferred to be home with their children, feeding them, or going to their grown children's home, caring for their grandchildren, or just celebrating family life together. These mothers' hearts could not rest until they acted, until they made a commitment to prevent such evil from being done to anyone else's children. Passionate commitment to action for many is not self-chosen. I imagine Jesus, witnessing the exploitative nature of the temple money changers at work, felt compelled to do something about it. Not violently, for he might have been immediately killed by the Roman soldiers that watched everything that was happening from above, but probably theatrically, disruptively. For Jesus to be who he was, he could not walk by the scene and not act. Miriam could not continue to live knowing that her daughter was dead and not respond. She was driven. She made huge personal sacrifices, giving up her normal life to pursue justice for her daughter. A commitment to action was the only way she could continue to live and have meaning in her life. In a way, I wouldn't wish this kind of suffering on anyone. To have a child disappeared is a grievous injury to the heart. Few of us here have experienced such an intense call to action. And yet, some of us may be sensing less intense calls to action to which they are not paying attention. Some of us may be experiencing discomfort, an urge to act that might be a little confusing or maybe unfocused. Or maybe some of us are experiencing a call to action and resisting it, saying, not now. I felt some of that about being nominated to run for the UUA board. I know it's a lot of work, and I know I have to cut back on some activities that I really want to do and I really enjoy. But when I got the initial contact with the request, I immediately knew I had to say yes. I knew intuitively there was something more important going on than attending and adding one more activity to my busy schedule. And it turns out that my candidacy will have me running against a representative of an anti-UUA protest movement. I'm now stepping into a contentious spotlight where I might have a unique role in helping make a positive, unanticipated difference. What inspired me to say yes when I sensed a call to action are the giants who model commitment to action beyond anything I ever hoped to achieve in my modest efforts. I am in awe of people like Brian Stevenson, who is a fellow Delawarean, although he grew up in a completely different experience of Delaware. Brian grew up in racist rural Sussex County, and I in the college town of Newark. His work with inmates on death row, his willingness to bring justice where Black inmates are routinely disrespected and discredited, his compassion, all deeply move and inspire me. Another giant I recently learned about is a human rights lawyer, Kimberly Motley, and she's of African-American and Korean descent, who went to Afghanistan to teach lawyer skills and stayed to represent Afghan clients. She learned not just the formal Afghan justice system, but also how to work with the ancient tribal systems of justice. In her excellent TED Talk, I recommend it, she describes using tribal law to undo a marriage of a 6-year-old girl to a rich man's son as a payment for a debt. Her work for human rights is remarkable, being a Black woman in a male-dominated Afghan legal system. I doubt this was her life plan growing up in Wisconsin. There are other giants of commitment to action. I could mention Bill McGibbon is a local favorite of mine. We know him from 350.org. Ever since he published his groundbreaking work in 1989, The End of Nature, he has been fighting climate change and advocating for solutions. Angela Davis has been fighting white supremacy since the 1960s, and she has not let up, and she's still at it. And we have local peace and justice advocates here in the Capital Region. These are the faithful that come to all the demonstrations. I'll mention one name from the Quaker tradition, Pat Beadle, who must be in her 90s now, very frail, but she still keeps showing up to answer the call to action. And when I get tired of showing up for one more rally, I think of Pat's determination, and that gets me moving. These are my people who are committed to action week after week, year after year. Yesterday, I got a text from Alyssa Kane honoring one of the most significant actions of my ministry, performing a joint same-sex marriage ceremony for 2 couples, March 27th, 2004. Answering the call to action usually doesn't get on the front page of the Times-Union the next day. That call came from our congregation, though. You didn't say that exactly what you wanted me to do. But when a reporter came to our congregation a couple of weeks before and asked people what they thought about gay marriage and were surprised not to hear any negatives, I heard a readiness for bold action. I was in a unique position to offer, through my official capacity, to do weddings. Lynn and Alyssa and Bob and George were willing to seize the moment with me and make a public witness for marriage equality by violating the law. I was overjoyed to have the opportunity to support their commitment to action. The opportunities for action need not be so monumental. Opportunities present themselves and can be quickly lost as they pass by. No matter how rational one might wish to be about calculating the decision to act or not to act, in the moment, there can be a sense of knowing that says yes or no. That sense of knowing can be refined by acting and reflecting on the results of the action taken. If we don't act, we can't learn from the results, both good and bad. Wise action comes from the accumulation of learning through doing. So my encouragement for you this morning is to take inspiration from those whose lives are a testimony to commitment to action. And I'm not asking you to get crucified, far from it. My encouragement is to make a repeating commitment to action so you can learn and grow in wisdom in order to act in ways that make a positive difference in the world. And that may entail some risk too. Yet the best way to become a wise actor is to make an ongoing commitment to action. So be it.
An important way we celebrate life each Sunday is by offering an opportunity to practice generosity. Members and friends support our congregation with an annual pledge paid throughout the year. Another way to support the good work of this congregation is by making a generous contribution via one of the options shown on the next slide. And today is the Sunday when we ask you to contribute to the Focus Food Pantry as well. You can click on the tiny URL link in the chat window to contribute, or you can send a text to the number shown on the screen. The examples on the slide show how to label your text to indicate the amount and the purpose or intent of your gift. And we must now say goodbye to our Facebook friends. Consider joining us on Zoom next time by visiting albanyuu.org. Our offertory music is Ubi Caritas, performed by Susan Mashiyama, the UU Congregation of Berkeley, and the Live Oak UU Fellowship.
Ubi caritas et And now we have a message from Christina Carrera. Go ahead, Christine.
Hi, I was asked to speak about giving. So here it goes. I'm Christine Carrera. I moved to Albany from Buffalo about 25 years ago. I sought out Albany's UU community because I was at the Buffalo UU community, and I just want to say that Albany UU has been the one constant thing since I've moved here. Even when I didn't show up, it was always still there. And what do I get out of UU? When I come to Albany UU, the messages and all of the actions, the social the social justice, everything, the meditations, everything resonates with me, and it's affirming to who I am. Albany UU is a safe place. Albany UU is a community for me. It's my family of choice. And I feel supported at Albany UU when I choose. When I'm courageous enough to ask, I'm supported. So Albany UU affirms who I am, what I believe, what I aspire to practice, and how I aspire to participate, and how I aspire to participate. So in giving, ways I give: annual pledge. I've volunteered for UU religious education, and I think one unique way that I've given is by sharing my personal stories with friends, people in the community. And as a result, some of them have showed up at UU, some have become active members, some have found meaningful relationships and connections, and have made meaningful memories through their connection with Albany UU. And what I believe that our leaders in our UU community deserve to have the fiscal resources needed to continue the work that they do, which has been the one constant thing in my life since I moved here 25 years ago. And it feeds my soul, and it feeds the soul of the community of which I am a part of. And each Sunday when I show up, it seems the message that I hear was somehow catered to what I needed at that moment. It always seems to be the case. So, closing statement: it is in giving that we receive. So be it.
Good morning. My name is Eric Van Housen, and I'll be your pastoral care associate today, along with Donna Meichner. This is a time set aside in our service for sharing significant personal milestones in our lives. There are 3 ways to share a joy or sorrow. The first option is to type your joy or sorrow into the chat window. Please put the words "read aloud" at the beginning of your message if you would like us to do that. Please also consider connecting privately in the chat windows with pastoral care associates. You may identify the ones on duty today. Look for PCA before their name. The second option is to click the raise hand symbol found either in the participant window or now under the reactions button. Our technician will invite you to unmute yourself and speak your joy or sorrow. The third option is to submit a joy or sorrow using our website by noon on Friday prior to our service. We'll begin by reading those that were submitted this past week. Then we'll hear the joys or sorrows spoken by people, followed by the chat entries that will be read aloud. Chris?
And we begin with this sorrow from El DeSalvo. He says, "The grief I feel at the loss of my Susan is often more than I can bear, but the gratitude I feel from the outpouring of support from so many Albany UU folks helps me immensely. You have kept me fed when I likely wouldn't have eaten. You have lent an ear when I needed to talk. You have sent me cards with expressions of deep caring and inspirational poetry. You have offered sage advice when I needed it. You have visited when being alone was difficult. I am so grateful to so many of you and so grateful to be part of this community. Thank you. Others who would like to share. Eric, I don't see anybody raising their hand, so
Okay.
let's move on to the chat.
The following joys and sorrows have been submitted in the chat window. From Mary Applegate, today I'm remembering my daughter's best friend of the past 15 years. After years of struggling with addiction and sometimes homelessness and hunger, he died of a drug overdose on Friday. Please hold him in your hearts. That's the only one I see. For all the joys and sorrows that remain unspoken, let us hold all that we've heard and felt in our hearts.
Our prayer of affirmation is in honor of Passover. This is a Passover prayer by Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt, meditation on Exodus 12:34, which says, "So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls wrapped in their cloaks upon their shoulders." Let us turn inward to receive these words. You'll need to travel light. Take what you can carry, a book, a poem, a battered tin cup, your child strapped to your chest, clutching your necklace in one hot possessive fist. So the dough isn't ready. So your heart isn't ready. You haven't said goodbye to the places where you hid as a child, to the friends who aren't interested in the journey, to the graves you've tended. But if you wait until you feel fully ready, you may never take the leap at all. And infinity is calling you forth out of this birth canal into the future's wide expanse. Learn to improvise flat cakes without yeast. Learn to read new alphabets. Wear God like a cloak and stride forth with confidence. You won't know where you're going, but you have the words of our sages, the songs of our mothers, the inspiration wrapped in your kneading bowl. Trust that when and what you carry will sustain you. And take the first step out the door. So be it. And let us close in song together, Fire of Commitment by Jason Sheldon, with words by Mary Catherine Moore. And our song leaders are Chris Jensen and Randy Rosette.
Assurance hunger and our passion, to call us on our way. When we live with the assurance of the flame that burns within, and our promise find fulfillment, and our future can be seen. From the dreams of youthful vision, from the new prophetic voice, which things underneath the justice fills my heart a radiant joy. When the fire of the mission sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion cease to call us on our way, when we live with the assurance of the flame that burns within, and our promise finds fulfillment, and our future can be seen.
As we extinguish the chalice, please join in the words shown on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And our closing words are by Jim McGaw. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in mindless oblivion. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go without challenging yourself or others. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in utter ease and comfort. When I say go in peace, I mean go in peace seeking justice. I mean go in peace, committed to equal rights and opportunities for all. When I say go in peace, I mean go in the peace that is created when together we build communities of true solidarity, deep compassion, and fierce, unrelenting love. Go in peace. And our thanks go today to our musicians, Elena Karpoff, Chris Jensen, Randy Rosette, our ushers, Kristen Abbas, Kathy Harris, Don Odell, and Annika Pfluger, our pastoral care associates, Eric Van Housen and Donna Meixner, Christine Carrera for our community message, our welcomer, Elizabeth Berberian. I'm your service associate, office support from Elizabeth Valdez, and technical support from Chris Jensen.